Okay, so in the interest of time, I think we're ready to get started. It's 1:02 here in PEI. So for those of you on this end of the country or this side of the continent, welcome and good afternoon. And to those of you in the West, good morning and welcome. I am Megan McKenzie. I'm the Manager of PD and Member Engagement for Caucus. Thank you for joining us in today's webinar. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we have folks joining us today from across Canada and the United States. We're all viewing and participating in this webinar on traditional territories of Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. We want to recognize their contributions to this place and express our gratitude for our ability to come together and learn today. I have to apologize. I made an error. We usually have our webinars captioned, but I mixed up my time zones and I told Captioner to come an hour late. So we won't have our webinar captioned today. I apologize for that. Just a couple of housekeeping items. If you've called in on the phone, please mute yourself on your end. If you're using the built-in audio in the room, you're muted automatically. It's a very popular webinar. We have a full house today. We're hoping to hear from you, but not accidentally while you have your mic turned on by accident. So please remember to mute on your end and to use the chat box where you're seeing people are saying hi and introducing themselves. That's the best way to get in touch with the panel today with your questions and your comments. So use the chat, communicate away, and thanks for helping us keep the conversation running smoothly. With that, I'll hand it over to Kathleen and Chris to introduce today's panel. So thank you so much for leading our conversation, and take it away.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Megan. With you today, my name is Chris Daw, and as you see with Strategic Healthy Impacts, but currently wearing the hat with the past regional representative with NERSA Canadian Region. And if you're looking at us on the screen there, you're seeing as well with Kathleen Hatch, who's also with Strategic Healthy Impacts, and the past president of NERSA, so wearing a couple hats there as well. And you were just hearing from the wonderful Megan McKenzie with Caucus. So she's the one with all the magic making it work in the background for us. So thank you, Megan, for that work. So we'll get things rolling along here in terms of an outline. We're obviously in the introduction stage. We're going to introduce the panelists in just a moment. We have some questions for the panelists, and you can see the list of those questions there. And then we're going to have the panelists kind of wrap things up with their perspective of where the hats that they are wearing and where those folks are going with this topic, and we'll wrap some things up. We will have an opportunity, as Megan said, to answer some questions, so you can put those into the chat box, and we'll capture those once we get close to the end, or perhaps as they might fit into some of the topics as we go. But with a large panel, we do have a fairly full webinar. There's the possibility we may not get to all the questions, but we will follow up with you to make sure that we get those questions answered after the webinar as well, so you'll get materials. One of the things that you should be seeing on your screen there is the shared files box. So the PowerPoint for this is shared. Within that PowerPoint, there are a number of links. And you can access those, and two of those links are also the strategies and principles document, as well as the Okanagan Charter, because those are ones we're obviously referring to a fair bit. And with that, I will turn it over to Kathleen.
Listen, thank you, Chris, and good morning, everyone, and good afternoon for some of our far East Coasters. Listen, we are just thrilled today to be here with some real talent and expertise to bring to bear on this very relevant conversation. You know, I think that the culture of health and well-being on college campuses has just ignited, and certainly university presidents and chancellors are paying attention, but so are all domains and all specialties and all disciplines and professions, and all the way down to practitioners. And so today, you know, we really want to start or continue a conversation. I was lucky enough to be at a Thought Leadership Summit last fall, where there was several of the voices that you'll hear from today were present. And what was really left from this initial inter-association conversation about health and well-being was really a very deep desire to continue the conversation and to continue to find ways to come together and ensure that we have bigger impacts. So Chris mentioned that we've got several voices, and the fact that we've got over 100 registered for this, we know that we're on a topic that's relevant, and we just look forward to continuing this. I think that although we have some international voices today, we've seen and identified, and thanks to Caucus for hosting this and pulling this together today, some Canadian voices and some exceptional, promising work and some emerging best practices that can be highlighted as we just all find new ways to bring our expertise and to learn from one another. So the panelists today that you'll hear from are Amanda Unruh, and you see here at UBC, and also chair of a community of practicing Caucus. We've got Devin Jope, Chief Executive Officer with American College Health Association, and Devin, I think, joins us from DC today. Ken Morton, welcome Ken, Director of Campus Rec at Stephen F. Austin State University and the President Designee of NERSA. Matt Dolph, Director of Strategic Support for UBC Wellbeing and Chair of the Canadian Health Promoting Campuses Network. And Peter, who you don't see but is joining us today, just audio, Associate Director of Campus Recreation at York University, as well as serving as the regional representative for the new NERSA Canadian region. So what we're going to start with today is just a couple of minutes from each of these individuals, sharing some initial thoughts and some of the work that they're a part of in their groups. So Amanda, I'll pass it to you to kick it off, and then we'll go down the list together.
Thanks so much, Kathleen. I guess I get to start since my name starts with A, so props to that. I am going to be wearing two hats today. One is that I am a health promotion specialist at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. And also I am the chair for the Student Health Community of Practice within Caucus. So a couple of the things I'm going to touch on today are some of the work we're doing with Caucus, is that our community of practice leads some work around coordinating a NACHA survey group every 3 years, so I'll speak a little bit to that. We also offer webinars for professional development for people who work in student health and wellness who are members of Caucus and across Canada, depending on what different topics are needed by our community. And we also have a platform where members of our community can ask questions through Caucus's community platform. So those are all some of the areas that we're working on and that I oversee.
Excellent. Devin, and how about you?
Sure. Devin Jopp, Chief Executive Officer for ACHA. We're going to touch on some updates throughout these slides. I think obviously we continue to value the partnerships that we have in Canada, all our institutions that take the NCHA, and so thank you, Amanda, for coordinating all that. The NCHA 3, we'll talk a little bit about that that's coming up, and also some of its implications on well-being, which I think is really timely for this discussion. We also have some work that we're doing around assessing faculty and staff, and well-being will also be a common thread through that. And we've got some really exciting work that we're doing on collecting data in a new data warehouse across universities that I think, again, we're looking at not just measuring health, but how do we start really raising the conversation of measuring well-being and what does that look like? So a lot of different areas for us to focus on and a very esteemed panel here, so thank you for the invitation.
Excellent, Devin. Ken.
Ken, you're muted.
Oh, there we go. I'll be representing the NERSA board on this, but more of even our NERSA membership to an extent, in that we've been in this space for a while now, but are now really formalizing kind of more of a role in this work with health and well-being. Recently, NERSA endorsed the Okanagan Charter. We were founders with NASPA and NERSA, and then had ACPA up with us at the Thought Leader Summit that Kathleen referred to. Most recently, we've actually made health and well-being a key priority in our new strategic plan going forward. And so NERSA is excited and happy to be trying to help lead in this space with health and well-being.
Terrific, Ken. We'll look forward to getting into more too. And Matt, some initial thoughts and even sharing your new name of the network.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Yeah, my name is Matt Dolph. I'm also wearing two hats. So I'm at the University of British Columbia. I'm the Director of Strategic Support for a relatively new university-wide initiative called UBC Wellbeing, and I act as the lead facilitator and strategic support for many of the portfolios, academic and operational and student-led across the university on both our campuses that have really been providing a lot of leadership in the health and well-being space. And I'm also the chair of the newly named, as Kathleen says, Canadian Health Promoting Campuses Network. We've been around for a couple years, and our mission is to work with campuses across the country to drive conversations around the Okanagan Charter and link up with networks around the world who are doing similar work.
Excellent. And Peter?
Good morning, afternoon, everyone. Like everyone here, wearing two hats, but with the NERSA hat on for Canada, we're currently trying to enhance our relationships with our peers across Canada that Kathleen and Chris have been fantastic at fostering. So that's, of course, with our partners in caucus, COPICA, which is our directors and deans of health and kinesiology through the colleges and universities, our varsity peers in youth sport, along with the Canadian College Athletic Association, just to help create that established cohesive approach on our health and well-being on campus.
Fantastic. Listen, thanks everybody, and look forward to our dialogue together this morning.
Great, thank you everyone. So we're going to get started with a question around the Okanagan Charter. And so we're going to ask Matt and Amanda to jump in on this one first, wearing, again, both your hats, thinking about why did UBC sign on to the Okanagan Charter to begin with, and then you can get into a little bit more of the hats you wear and why others across the country or countries that we have on the line here might consider doing the same.
Great. So I'll jump in first, and I think most of you on the webinar are probably familiar, but I'll give a little bit more context for what the Okanagan Charter is. It was created a couple years ago out of an international conference hosted at the UBC Okanagan campus, which is why it's called the Okanagan Charter, which brought about people from about 85 universities, 40-plus countries, including World Health Organization, UNESCO, and Pan American Health Organizations together to create this really exciting output, which we then called the Okanagan Charter, an international charter for health promoting universities and colleges. And the power of the charter has really been around giving everybody some shared language, which is easy to read and understand around health and well-being promotion on a campus setting. And I think for many universities and colleges, it's created a kind of a North Star for us to all work towards in a collaborative way. And then also a relatively straightforward way to engage community members at all levels, but in particular senior leadership. And in Canada, we've started to look at ways that we can make formal commitments around that. So the Canadian Health Promoting Campuses Network was formed in 2016 as a way to formalize a group of universities and campuses doing this work. And I've already said that our purpose is really to drive action forward around the Charter. And about a year and a half ago, we created a formal process for campuses to adopt the Charter. We kicked off with 6 universities, including UBC being the first in the world. Oh, there's the slide showing our website, if anybody's interested. I think it's just back one. There's the healthpromotingcampuses.ca, which you're welcome to go and visit. It's getting a refresh imminently, but on there you can also sign up, and anybody can be a participant to follow activities or share best practices. So if we jump to the next slide, that shows the 10 universities that have formally adopted the Charter to date. And as I was saying, it was kicked off by 6 universities, including UBC, who jointly got 6 presidents to say, we formally commit, we want to encourage our peers across Canada and elsewhere to do the same. It's a relatively simple commitment statement, but I think every university added on their own set of commitments on how they would drive action forward. At UBC, we committed to $1 million in annual ongoing funding to support the whole university at all levels, which is quite a remarkable level of commitment, to drive the conversation, also add capacity specifically into supporting the conversation going forward. We also created a second process called endorsement of the charter. And that came up because groups like Caucus and NERS and others, the Canadian Mental Health Association, said we'd also like to support this effort. And so we realized it made sense to provide a formal mechanism for them to do that. So congratulations, NERSA and Caucus, for being the first organizations to formally endorse the charter and do exactly this kind of thing, convene conversations and bring your networks of practice who do really important work in their portfolios to inform the charter and also think about how that language can inform that work. There was another Caucus webinar last year that talks more about why universities saw value in adopting the charter and ways that they've actually been implementing it. So I'd encourage people to go look at that if you want to get a bit more of a deep dive on that. But I think this webinar will touch on some of the physical activity, in particular ways that the charter has been helpful in driving its work. So I'll just summarize by saying I basically walk around the university with the charter in my back pocket. It informs every plan and strategy that we use. The principles and calls to action are very powerful, and we're starting to embed it throughout the university on a day-to-day basis.
Great. Thank you. Amanda, do you want to add anything with some UBC perspective there?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, thank you, Matt, for that great overview. And I get the opportunity to work with Matt, who's working at a much higher level of embedding well-being in the university. And as my role is more of a health educator and specialist on the ground working with students, faculty, and staff and providing education for them, having the Okanagan Charter as something that the university has prioritized and committed to is really an amazing way to embed health promotion and well-being across the university. So I don't have to go into offices and trying to convince them. I can often just point to the Okanagan Charter and the university's adoption of it, and it's just an accepted part that well-being is a priority for the university and for our students. So it's been amazing to have it as a foundational piece. That's everything.
Great, thank you. And Ken, do you want to touch on a little bit with NERSA being one of the first to endorse outside of Canada?
Well, I'd love to. Thanks, Chris. NERSA is very proud, actually, to be the first U.S.-based organization to endorse the charter. And we did so after a lot of discussion and deliberation on that. And the reasons really are because health and well-being are integral to student success. Campuses that promote integrated well-being are advancing not only higher learning, but also the core purpose of higher education. The charter aligns with and it exemplifies NERSA's strategic values, which are sustainable practices, health and well-being, service, leadership, equity, diversity and inclusion, and global perspective. And so we felt really strongly that it aligned right with what we were doing and kind of provided this visible framework that our members could use on their campuses to help start doing this work and building upon that. So we're really proud to sign on.
That's great. Thank you, Ken. Any of the other panelists want to jump in on anything before we move to the next one with the Okanagan Charter? Okay, Kathleen, take it away.
All right, well, thanks. And I think it was a perfect place to start because so many, look at that charter language once, for those of you who aren't familiar with it yet, as, pretty high framework, and it doesn't necessarily give you the real meat and action. And I think that, part of the conversations that happened in the fall at this Thought Leadership Summit, of which both Ken and Devin, attended and were part of, was a bit of the next layer and, very preliminary. And for those of you listening in, you can now pull up the summary of that meeting and look at, some of these initial strategies and principles. But I'm wondering if both of you will just take a minute and, maybe to share an observation or a highlight, for you, having been there and a part of those conversations, and how you see this work evolving, both with NERSA and ACHA. And Devin, I'll start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Kathleen. And I have to say, anytime you can get a whole bunch of bright people together that are passionate about well-being, it makes for a great time. And it was fascinating for us, I think, because we all own different parts of this, right? And we all know that, we have athletics, and we have health, and we have counseling, and we have student conduct and student life, and all these parts. But we know that also trying to advance the well-being discussion is critically important, and it really gets to the upstream factors that I think we all are struggling with. So I was really impressed by who we had together. I think the focus on this, and also I think we really drilled down into trying to figure out what makes well-being. How do we really define that? What are the pieces of this on campus? And I also think the other thing that I really enjoyed about it was kind of the multi-leveled approach, that this isn't just one group's problem. It's really going to take all of us working together. And I think ACHA is committed to that. I know NERSA is and NASPA and others that were all there, and more organizations. And I was telling Kathleen, I got to sit through a meeting of American Council of Education focused on well-being the other day. And so I'm very honored to see that this is gaining traction and speed, and it is going to take an army of all of us working together at all different levels to really make it work. So that was my impression. It was a great first step, and I think a lot more to come, hopefully, as we kind of continue to build forward and build momentum on this.
Yeah, terrific. Thanks. And Ken, put your NERSA hat on for us.
Well, it was really, I echo Devin. It was really nice to be in that room with those folks who were there, realizing the enormity of the work that is still to come was eye-opening also, but seeing the collaborative spirit and knowing that the different associations that were there are willing to drop our silos and our walls and work together to move this work forward was just so refreshing and great to see. We've been doing some, and I agree with all the different approaches, and you can see what's on the slide right now is talking about the different layers that we're looking at to that ecological model. Some of the work, I think, that you want to talk about what we've kind of done since then a little bit.
Yeah, no, and we'll get into that in I think the next couple of slides as well, Ken. But I just want to concur with both of you that it was that we don't often we haven't often been in the same place at the same time, and so how refreshing it was to just all of us feel like maybe there can be a reset to the work, and that our domains and voices are so much stronger when they're together. So I just want to thank you both for your contribution and what we see ahead too. Chris, I'll pass it back to you.
Well, before you do that, though, I have to say, getting all those people on the same page was a tough chore. I don't know how you heard Katz that way, but Kathleen, you did a fantastic job of facilitating that discussion.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. And that really does, I mean, as often is the case in these kinds of webinars, we're going to roll this question right through into the next piece. And Devin, you queued this up well, and it's interassociation. So we wanted to hit on, I guess, a few topics there. And we're going to have Ken, if you can get this one started for us a little bit, and talking about what is the work that needs to happen or is happening and can happen with the various organizations or associations that are helping lead this work.
Sure. Right now, from that, NERSA and NASPA are working on a joint statement that we will invite other associations to sign on to. That statement is really just to talk about how to commit resources and prioritize generating content that can be used to activate integrated well-being on member campuses. So we're talking about educational content, networking, research, those kinds of things, and committing funds for that through that joint statement. Certainly we, Caucus and NERSA are working together on some content for their annual conference coming up. NERSA has been working with ACHA, and we're in active discussions with Devin and his folks about some joint education events coming up. NERSA also works with some, orgs outside of higher education that promote physical activity, which is part of what we're doing with that. And then hopefully, what I think we took out of that meeting is also that each association will start making some time and space for each other to present at each other's conferences. And talking with NERSA and wearing my board hat with that they come with, some money to help get some facilitators and some presenters to those other conferences, because we learn a lot from being in each other's space. And I think that this work going forward and trying to make it relevant to the campuses has to be modeled by the associations that we're a part of. And seeing those silos break down and being able to present in other people's spaces and understand the value of that collaborative and more integrated work is going to move what's going to move us forward.
Thanks, Ken. Devin, from the ACHA perspective.
Yeah, I think Ken said it. For our perspective, again, it's looking at who owns various pieces of this pie, and it's going to take a full effort. And I was thinking this the other day. I was in a meeting where we were talking about institutional structures and characteristics. Now, how do you get faculty involved in coordinating workload and, start times, end times, all these different things in the institution that are going to be, that really all come together. So one is, we tend, and I'll speak for ACHA, we tend to think of how do you teach these students well-being, right? And that certainly is one piece of it. But we've got the structural pieces. We also have what's happening even when they transition in or even beforehand. And so I think as we're looking at how do all associations work together, we really see that spirit of cooperation. I think, as Ken said, learning from each other is really going to be important as we really try to figure out how do we chip this thing apart of well-being and really tackle things that are going to be the most, I think, impactful. So, it's the beginning of it really, I think, is where we are, but I think we also have a lot of direction forward with all the different groups trying to figure out what are the various pieces and how they plug together. Because I think the worst thing we'd want to see is have different groups do the same thing, right? And then we're just kind of copying effort. So.
Great. Yeah, great point for sure. Amanda, how about from the caucus perspective?
So I just want to sort of dovetail off of what Devin was saying, is that one of the first things we need to get a sense of is where are we at now. So the only way we can do that is through some of the, well, one of the best ways is through some of the research and assessment that we're doing. So Caucus has been helping to coordinate a national cohort of campuses that are taking part in the ACHA, NCHA, ACHA-NACHA, since 2013. So we did our first, there were other schools participating prior to that, but the first major cohort was in 2013. In the spring of 2013, we did another cohort in the spring of 2016, and we're gearing up for the cohort for spring 2019. So those are just ways that we can work together and have a number of Canadian universities and regions represented. And so we can get a sense of where we're at and what are some of the trends that we're seeing across Canada as well as provincially. And those all help inform both the work that Caucus is doing, the work my community of practice is able to do, as well as the work our universities are doing in the health promotion, health education, recreation. Again, there's so many people who are doing pieces of this, including our colleagues in HR who do this for our faculty and staff. So those are just some of the things that Caucus is focusing on. We also coordinate a set of Canadian questions, and in 2013 and 2016, those were the Corey Keyes flourishing, languishing questions that were assessing our students' ability to flourish or whether they were languishing. So those are just some of the pieces that we're helping to coordinate in anticipation of spring 2019.
Fantastic. Thank you, Amanda. Appreciate that. And so the role of physical activity. We, in the campus rec world, and we've got some folks on the line both on our panel as well as in our audience here, certainly the campus rec folks have understood themselves to be part of the physical component of health for a lot of years. But up until relatively recently, campus rec folks haven't necessarily been in the conversation for the Okanagan Charter. And that's certainly one of the pieces that we worked on through the Canada in Motion project last year, and some of the stuff that we're talking about here in connecting the associations, because we believe that connection needs to happen on our campuses as well as across all the associations to support that work. So certainly a growing body of evidence in terms of connecting the role of physical activity in well-being and these full campus approaches. Peter, I wonder if you could start us off, please, and tell us how you see this evolving and the role that Campus Rec will play in the campus initiatives that are underway.
Thank you, Chris. One of the key factors that I believe from a recreation perspective that we're trying to face is how we can ensure that we're staying connected with our peers across campus and not duplicating our services. So speaking, of course, just from the York University model, we're working closely with our peers in student services through mental health disability services, Res Life, Career Center, and then, of course, our Federation Student Center as well. And we're starting to see, through some collaborative efforts, a rise in the awareness of the students on campus to participate in some form of a physical activity that coincides with the benefits of the overall wellness of themselves. We're also starting to see a rise in our programs requested from our Res Life centers, as well as through a lot of our faculty and office space areas as well. And so those are some two key areas that we're really trying to focus on and collaborate. And then we're looking into some research areas as well with our partners in kin and mental health services, so we can actually get some more quantitative data rather than just some anecdotal data that we're seeing.
Great, thanks. And Matt, do you want to add from the perspective of UBC and the network? Oh, you're muted, Matt.
There we go. Thanks. So I'll speak primarily from the UBC perspective on this one. So as I was saying, the charter gives us kind of the how and why to do this work, but we needed to choose what areas of priority action we wanted to drive at UBC. There are so many things we could do, and we asked our community, what should we focus on first? Mental health and resilience is a big one, social connections is a big one, but one of the other very strong ones is physical activity. And so about a year and a half ago, we created a university-wide working group of staff, faculty, students to think about this challenge and came up with an action framework to increase physical activity and reduce sedentary behavior. That you're seeing the cover shot of the framework on the left, and that's available on our website. I think it's a really nice, clear document that shows how the charter can drive action in the area of physical activity. And working with researchers in particular, I think, was one of the unique opportunities. And they were the ones that said, focus on sedentary behavior. So the chart on the right, and I realize it's too small to see, but it shows brand new guidelines, not just around, everybody knows that, we're supposed to move 150 minutes a week. Or most people know about that, but few people know that there are guidelines and recommendations about sedentary behavior, and really it boils down to just getting people to move more and sitting less. And this has really informed our approach, where we wanted to work with our staff who sit all day at their desks, or our community members that commute in for a long drive, to get them to break up sedentary behavior throughout the day. One of the more exciting initiatives we've done at UBC is create something called the Move UBC campaign, which is a month-long celebration of ways to move in big ways and small ways. And we have hundreds of events across the campus that are little things like encouraging walking meetings to, take the stair activations, to large events. And we did a university-wide Wear Your Activewear Day, which was a huge hit. So people could come in their yoga pants and wear a pin that says, this is why I'm wearing them. Our campus security folks wore colorful sneakers. So really everybody got into the spirit of it. And I think it was inspired by a U of T effort called Move U, and so we UBC-ified it for ourselves, and I think it's a good example of a campaign that others can do. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, we're very excited about increasing our partnership with the research side of the house. And so we've recently created a new staff position that sits in kinesiology and works with a similar staff position in recreation that think to how we can take an evidence-informed approach to getting the whole university to move. And so increasingly, we're trying to get staff across our university with a university-wide mandate, not just thinking in their portfolio, but thinking about how to bring health and well-being across the whole university and everything that we do and work with faculties. So physical activity has been a real driver for us in this area, and I think a really good example for people on how this can actually play out. And we're happy to talk more about what UBC has done and hear what others have done in this area.
And I want to add a little bit, Matt, and you obviously have such a gorgeous natural setting on your campus there, but I know that you, as well as Simon Fraser and other universities, are really thinking about the built space and design elements and standards that encourage it. And certainly one of the principles coming out of Miami was a reminder and a commitment back to, you know, thinking about space that will regenerate and, you know, help aid movement. And it doesn't have to all be in the gym, right? There are folks that we just are not going to see there, and it doesn't mean that we in some disciplines will continue to shape community and find ways to, you know, bring people into spaces conducive to higher intensity. But this is really just about the activation of, you know, one step, one move, you know, one more flight of stairs. And when you mentioned U of T, I just wanted to highlight that too, because I've certainly talked about that and shared that in many circles. And it was so impressive to see at the root and of the genesis of some of that work at U of T was around listening first to students about what was germane. They needed to know that for them to be successful academically, that this was then important in that equation. And, you know, their whole campaign around physical literacy, and then having faculty have real evidence of a long, you know, 3-hour lecture or 90-minute class that was infused in a short exercise break or movement break, you know, reshape learning. So I do think that there's plenty of great examples, and sometimes we've got to make sure that we don't let something get too complicated. You know, that it can be quite simple to activate and then have evidence that changes, you know, the lives of people and their outcomes and opportunities as a result. So congratulations on the great work you guys are doing, and I do think that there's lots of highlights that of people doing reimagining, you know, just the role again of activity.
Yeah, and maybe just to build off one of your points there, Kathleen, I think that's really important that we made the case with our presidents and our deans and others by saying that this is about promoting excellence in learning, in productivity, in how we live and work on our campus. I mean, for those of you who don't know, UBC is 85,000 people with a nighttime population of, I think it's around 40,000 people. So we have to think in terms of how people are living. And that's not just about the gym, it's about everything else, how they're commuting, working, living, moving across the campus, and just building that into the rationale, changing everything that we do.
Terrific.
Kathleen, you want to jump into our next question?
You bet. Yeah, we've got a couple of you, and maybe even if time permits, and we can start to think about some of our, how much time we've got, and are there questions coming in here too. But we really wanted to sort of end this series of questions, you know, with some thoughts around how we move the equation, how we think about a new paradigm. You know, I think some old language, you know, looks at ROI, this return on investment, and often it's in the short term. It's something you can see, it's something quick. You know, this life cycle, we make decisions about purchases and things to invest in, but it needs to be immediate. And I think when we start to talk about the value of the investment and the value of health, you know, it's over time. And so I'm just wondering, you know, and I know we've got at least Peter and Amanda maybe to talk about this one too, that how can we collectively reshape And Devin, you may even want to contribute to this one too, given some of the data and the questions that we're going to look at. But how can we, bring this into the core and, just as Matt was describing, have some very senior executives start to think differently about investing. Peter, how about I start with you?
Thanks, Kathleen. It is one of those hot topics, and it's an interesting one on the angle to take. And you've touched on a number of areas. As I mentioned before, we're just starting in a collaborative research project focusing mainly on the students. The other angle that we're taking, though, as well, is working with our Office of Staff Wellness, our Occupational Health and Wellness Office, and we're looking at the value of that investment in terms in relation to the overall cost to the university. So if the input to increasing involvement and participation in some way or fashion or form, and not necessarily the gym, equates to X number of dollars, what's that value back to us in terms of the engaged staff, the extra work level that they feel they want to put into it, as well as the minimization of burden on the benefits package that a lot of us see in terms of that. And we've done some initial projects. We've just done one with one of our labor associations on a GlucoFit project targeting those staff who are pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic, and how we can assist and aid them with their diabetes. And again, cost consciously minimize the level of support needed on our benefits package. And we've seen a initial reduction in those costs, and the output from the university was a quarter of what they would normally spend. So we're going to look to increase that even further and think outside the box to all the different angles on what that looks like from a staff, faculty, healthy well-being approach. The other part of it, and maybe some of the others might touch on this, is how do we deal with that, those students who, they don't stay on campus. They come to our campus, they do their classes and leave. We want to make sure that we're reaching them from all levels as well and getting them engaged. And then how do we ensure that we're keeping them retained here as well and wanting to come back? But I'll leave that maybe for Amanda or Devin or Matt to touch on.
Sure. Listen, great start, Peter. Amanda, what about you?
Yeah, I'll do my best to touch on that. I just want to sort of add the place I'm coming from is that doing health promotion and things like that, I've seen a really big shift already in the last 5 to 7 years, where prior to that time, I think we were really focusing on things like behavior change, or people going to the gym more, or people doing these tangible one-off things, eating more fruit or whatever that was that we were looking for. But I've seen a really big shift, and I think this webinar is a really great jumping off point for some folks. But to recognize that prior to the Okanagan Charter, a lot of this work was already happening, and these shifts were happening where we were trying to move from this behavior-based model, and we were shifting to recognizing that the systems, the classrooms, the work environments are really what are impacting people's well-being, in addition to the education, the health literacy, and all those pieces that are also very important. But we need all of those levels to be able to support the value of the investment that's happening across the university. And I think that the Okanagan Charter is a great place for us to be a jumping off point, to be able to talk about embedding well-being as embedding well-being across our campuses. At UBC, we talk a lot about the value of the sense of well-being and the social connection, and that's really what's impacting our students' well-being, our faculty and staff's well-being, that they want to feel like they belong here. And that's a question that's on our undergraduate experience survey every year. And that really will help with their well-being and their contributions to UBC. I also want to mention just a couple things on that slide there of ways that we found that maybe are not financial, and that's not an area that I can really speak to. Maybe Matt can speak more to that. But that are ways we found to work with other groups on campus to increase that value of other people who, as Devin said earlier, are part of the pieces of the pie. Maybe that's the wrong metaphor. Other people who are doing this work. So UBC Thrive is an example of something that's been running since 2009. and it's a collaboration between our student services folks and our human resources folks who are doing health promotion work. And it's really a campus-wide approach, and everyone for 1 week focuses on building positive mental health across the campus. We have over 100 different events between our 2 campuses, so our Okanagan campus is involved as well. And that's just one way that we're able to work across units, that we all have this priority, and then it's really embedded within numerous positions to be able to take the lead on organizing things like this. Another thing that we're able to do, another project we're working on, is around looking in the classroom, because the one thing all students have in common is that they all go to class, except for grad students. So yeah, maybe I can't speak for all students, but a project that's been happening at UBC, and I think this speaks to what Kathleen was saying around it. A lot of the time it's just these small things about how do you embed well-being in the classroom, and I know other universities have done some work as well, but I just wanted to highlight this folder that we were able to create and hand out to different groups on campus, looking at teaching practices in the classroom. And some of these, they were done through an extensive research project, but some of these suggestions are so small. It's like, smile at your students, like learn students' names. And those are all part of the sense of belonging that's really important to UBC, and that we're really trying to embed in a lot of the well-being work that we're doing across campus. So those are just some of the things I wanted to mention.
Listen, that's fantastic. Matt, Ken, Devin, anything else to sort of add to this question?
Yeah, I think, to that point, and I think, Amanda, you made some great points. This whole question of ROI and VOI, I think really comes back to, we are going to have to measure well-being. And well-being is a construct. It's not separate and distinct from health and wellness, right? It's part of, it's all ingrained to, and it's holistic. And I think, some of the discussion, I read an article recently that said it's impossible to measure well-being, and I thought, if it's impossible, then we're never going to make progress on this, right? Because we all need measurable goals. And so I think some of the work that you all have done with the NCHA2 and adding some of the core keys questions and so on, I think has been really great. And it's really groundbreaking, because I think, again, it's starting to get to that, what are we measuring? Are we measuring social connection? Are we measuring resiliency? Are we measuring activity? Are we measuring happiness, right? And I think as we look at those measures, part of one of the discussions, I think, Amanda, you were talking about institutional characteristics, is what are some of those measures as institutions we need to adopt outside of things that, that we know we're already tracking that might actually move the needle a little bit. So I'm a big believer in ROI, and I think there is ROI in well-being. It's just how do we construct it and make sure that we're all benchmarking and monitoring it together.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were saying that, Devin, imagine sort of in the Maclean's top universities in Canada in a 5 years, 10 years, some threshold out where they start with this sense of these metrics, this scorecard, this analysis that has reached and embedded in every different institutional characteristic, and that there's an analysis of achievement that then directly correlates with student success, and and retention of faculty, and there's so many different ways. So this has been a great start to this conversation. I know I want to keep us moving just a little bit, because I want to give each of you now a chance to talk a little bit about what's ahead, and then I think we've got a couple of questions that we're going to try to cue in here as well. So Amanda, I think you're first in line here as we pass to the next slide. Thanks, Chris. Just sort of a little taste of what's coming up out of the community of practice.
Thanks, Kathleen. So just two things. One is that, as I've mentioned, we are working with a number of Canadian institutions to plan NCHA 2019. We actually had a webinar 2 weeks ago that I believe will be available on Caucus's YouTube channel. You can get in touch with me via my email, which is on the webinar slides, if you're interested in being a Canadian institution. And we have many resource guides to help institutions maybe who have never been involved with NCHA. In our last cohort, we had, I think, 43 institutions, so there's quite a few groups in Canada that are participating. So that's coming up. And then the second piece I am now blanking on, so I'm going to leave it to the next person.
Okay, terrific. Devin, what about you?
Yeah, a couple things. Just quickly moving through, I think the NCHA, we've talked a lot about that. The third version of that is coming up in 2019. And that's going, again, to be focused on a number of different things that we've tried to look at, a lot more specificity around some mental health issues, and also, of course, well-being. And I think as we're still working through the well-being component, we're excited about it. I think it'll be a really good instrument, and we'll continue to build out off of the success of the NCHA, too. We've also launched the National Faculty, Staff, and Health Assessment, which gets to what I think we've been talking about, which is how do we actually add the faculty and staff component. We actually have a couple schools that are actually doing the faculty and staff component at the same time they're doing their students. So we are going to carefully monitor what happens. I have a hypothesis that we're going to see that greater faculty and staff, health and wellness probably leads to greater student health and wellness, but the data is early, and we'll have to see, and we'll have a lot more to talk about by the time we get to the end of this year. We also are launching something called a Connected College Health Network, which when it launches will be the largest set of kind of a data warehouse of college health and wellness data. It's featuring an institutional profile that looks at not only like number of providers and square footage and counselors, it also looks at things like their health promoting practices on campus. And so we're going to have that information that's going to be included, and we're also going to be grabbing data out of the electronic health records and counseling system records de-identified out of institutions and aggregating that data and giving dashboards to universities to be able to start doing their own slicing and dicing and comparative data, which I think is going to be really exciting. Again, it's a great way for us to foster collaboration and look at some of these measures. One of the big things we're going to do is eventually start to try to collect grade point average data de-identified, so we can start looking at, can we actually see changes in grade points and also in student retention over time. And as we all are here, I'm sure going to shake our heads, the holy grail is to show how it ties to academic success, right? And if we can do that, that's kind of what we're driving towards. October 8th and 9th, we're holding a summit on well-being here in Washington, D.C. It'll be in person, and we also are going to be live streaming it for free. We're going to be focused on the first day on really kind of building a culture of well-being, the second day on looking at food insecurity and campus homelessness, so kind of meeting the basic needs before you even get to well-being. How do we ensure your basic well-being? And then finally, we're working on a new health and wellness transition to college website that's going to be available to any university that we're actually hoping to roll out at the end of this year also. So again, trying to look at, it's not just going to be basic things around, how do you make sure if you have a chronic health condition, what do you do? But it's, it's student health insurance, it's looking at well-being, it's looking at tips on how do you make sure you transition in the healthiest way that you can possibly be. So maybe we can actually start getting a little earlier in the whole health and well-being discussion. So a lot of big items coming down the pike, but I think they're all hopefully culminating in improving the well-being of our students.
Listen, that's fantastic. I hope you stay well in order to get it all done.
Thanks.
Ken, what about you? And NERSA?
One of the first things is that we really prioritize this content at the annual conference, which is coming up here in a week and a half, 2 weeks. There's a director's pre-con that's really focused on creating a culture of health and well-being on your campus. There's several other sessions with similar, if not the same kind of name, but similar topics throughout the session. We're having an executive institute in June, and this will be one of the topic areas within it. And so certainly NERSA is prioritizing this as some educational content. The NERSA Assembly, which is, for those of you not involved in NERSA, is kind of our think tank for our association, is working on a resource toolkit for well-being that they're going to come up with over this next year. So being able to have members and member campuses have some resources available to them to be doing some of the work. NERSA has prioritized funding in research for projects that demonstrate outcomes from integrated well-being efforts on individual campuses. And so we're really looking at trying to, how do we get that research tie? And hopefully, Devin has hit on that a couple of times, but how do we really show that the investment in it has that value to it. So, and then at the annual conference, I think we'll be looking at using that as a chance to kind of take the pulse of our members at the conference and kind of gauge where our members are at, and that'll kind of help inform our future endeavors at what we do as an association. You know, going forward, we need to know where people are, what do they need, you know, how far along on the space are they, in order to find out how to best meet those needs as an association. That's something we're certainly focusing on here in a couple of weeks.
Excellent. You're right, and Denver's just around the corner, and it's the content is rich, and so I'm sure there will be lots of things to spring forward. Matt, what about with the network?
Yeah, with the network, we're going to launch a new website, I think, within the month, and that will highlight resources to help campuses and organizations drive the conversation forward, and also an encouragement for more universities and colleges to join the next wave of signing on. A number of colleges in particular have expressed interest, so we're hoping to get 4, 5, 6, or 7 together to do a joint announcement. So reach out to me and through the website if you're interested. And then at UBC, lots of movement. We've recently created an action framework on food nutrition that people might be interested in, and this year we're working hard on mental health and resilience and social connection. Our brand new university strategic plan is coming out soon, and Wellbeing and the Okanagan Charter are almost certain to figure extremely prominently in it, which is a pretty remarkable thing. And so we'll be working on a new university-wide strategy around well-being that more strongly links to evaluation as well.
Fantastic. And Peter, Canadian region.
Yeah, for Nurse of Canada, we do have an upcoming event. Of course, many of us are coming down to Denver as well. And to learn and share ideas, we are hosting our Nurse of Canadian East Conference at the University of Guelph. Still hoping to be in partnership with U-Sport there to have some cross-collaboration with our varsity partners. And that's from May 30th to June 1st. And we're in the final process of hopefully having a pre-con session at Caucus, the weekend of June 15, 16, I believe it is, out in PEI. So we're very excited to, again, be collaborating with our partners in Caucus on that. And then again, just here on York University campus, we're doing that environmental scan, and it's great, Matt, that you touched on what U of T did. We've gone even a little further and found out they've gotten some information from University of Waterloo and Laurier as well, or there was some back and forth between all 3 of the schools. So we're trying to do some partnership work with those three schools here in Ontario to try and help make some more formative opinions and approaches to what we do here at York, but throughout all the Ontario and Canadian schools.
Terrific. Listen, thanks everyone, and I'll pass it back to you, Chris.
Great. Thanks, Kathleen. I know that we did have a couple of questions. We'll follow up on those, and I know there was some follow-up happening in the chat box there, but we'll make sure that we get some more information out. But respecting everyone's time, we are just about at the top of the hour, so we'll wrap things up here. First of all, a huge thank you to all of you that have joined us today, and then for those that are going to listen in on the YouTube later on, and appreciate your engagement in this topic and all the great work that you're doing on all of your campuses. Certainly a huge thank you to our panelists who have joined us and wore a couple of different hats and brought in a number of different perspectives. We know that this is just the beginning of a conversation. These hours go very quickly. We do have, as a couple people referred to, certainly in Denver with the NERSA annual conference, for those that are able to join that one. There's a number of sessions, but including a large inter-association session that Kathleen will be facilitating on Tuesday, March 6th at 8 a.m., bright and early in the morning. That will be a great way to start off that day. And then as Peter just referred to, so we've received word that our caucus pre-conference has been approved. So we're working with a number of folks that are on this panel, as well as within the different connections, to put together that pre-conference. It'll be the afternoon of Sunday, June 17th in Charlottetown, PEI. So hopefully all of you that are on this call will be able to join us there in wonderful PEI, and where Megan is, who we're going to turn it over to here now and just wrap us up.
Thank you so much to today's panel for leading this conversation, and a special thank you to everyone here who joined us today to participate and those who will view this on YouTube afterwards. I also want to send a giant thank you to Tracy and ACS, our captioning provider, who saved the day and arrived to caption the webinar for you, even with my time zone blunder. So thank you so much, Tracy, for being here. I will send out a follow-up email today with the slides and all the resources and links that were shared today so that you can go back and catch anything you might have missed. I'll also send a quick survey just to collect some feedback from you. We really appreciate that feedback, and we'll definitely use it to make future webinars and the pre-conference that was mentioned better for you, and make sure that what we're offering is relevant. If you want to continue the conversation, registration will be opening very soon for the annual joint conference. This year is a joint conference between Caucus and O'Rourke, and we're especially excited to be offering the pre-conference that Peter and Chris mentioned earlier. Information will be posted online in the next couple of days, and we're hoping that registration will launch ahead of our March 1st goal, so next week. So keep your eyes on the Caucus website for that. Thank you again, everybody, and have an absolutely wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.